Hey guys, it's Em. And today I wanted to talk about an interesting little game. Spooky's House of Jump Scares, and no, I don't care that they changed the name, that's what it's called in my heart, has been on my radar for quite a while now. I remember it blowing up around 2016 or so and seeing multiple playthroughs of it pop up on my timeline, but when I saw these, the Funny Bear game was the only thing that mattered to me, so I blew it off. When scrolling the PSN store for something else entirely different, it popped up and I felt a wave of nostalgia flood over me. Eventually it ended up in my library, and I must say, it is something so unique, I feel I can't help but discuss it. And seeing as we're in October, I suppose it fits. But that's enough talking. Let's just jump into it. Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion is probably the simplest horror game you'll ever play. You can run, you get an axe that can stun some things chasing you, and that's it. The game consists of running into doors that consist of randomly generated rooms while various monsters chase after you. It's a very simple gameplay loop that without some spice would lose its steam quite fast. But that's when we get to this game's main trait, the variety of monsters. See, while your controls are simple to use, most of the fun in this game comes from using that simple kit to get around these creatures that come after you with many different abilities. Sure, there are some simple monsters you just run from, as it is standard with games like this, but then you get to the others that can disorientate your vision, quickly go through walls to catch you, or flood the room to hinder your movement. And these are just some of the examples, as this game has 31 or so different creatures to deal with, each of which having their own unique abilities in counterplay. When you're going through the story of this game blind, you'll always be surprised by the many different forms your pursuers will take. One moment you'll be running from a wall of contorting faces, then you'll be running from a slime monster. It's fun to learn what all these monsters do and operate like, alongside dealing with the tension in between. As unlike most games and how I thought this game would initially work, you're not being chased through every single floor. This game will randomly give you empty floors with no creatures in them at all. Some may think this is boring as you're waiting for your next dopamine hit of a chase, but I'd say it tends to make you more tense and on edge as you're always prepared to hear the chase music go off and be ready to go at a moment's notice. It's a really cool but small decision I appreciate. My only complaint with this gameplay and gameplay loop is in the story, it eventually gets pretty easy. Many of these monsters have one simple trick, and once you learn all of theirs individually, there's not much stopping you from just blazing through the game. At least to there not being much replay value, as you can easily maneuver around all the monsters at that point. Even the DLC's monsters suffer from this. But this is where Endless Mode comes in and turns the game from a cakewalk into a proper horror and I'd say action game. Endless Mode mushes up all the monsters from the DLCs in base game, alongside adding some unique Endless exclusive ones. You then do as you would normally do, run from the monsters and go door to door. But this puts all of your game knowledge into play, as unlike the structured introductions of the other modes, the creatures you get here will be randomly introduced in whatever order the game pleases, meaning you'll have to quickly think on the fly to what all these monsters do, alongside picking up the newly added creatures' abilities. You may be thinking, yeah, but if you do know all those and then learn the Endless exclusive monsters, doesn't it get stale all the same? Not really, because they do something here the base game doesn't. Have multiple monsters chase you at the same time. This is where I'd say the game is firing on all cylinders. Sure, it becomes simple to deal with all these guys one-on-one, but when multiple powers get thrown into the mix at the same time, it really tests your ability to get out of these situations, as there are many strong combinations in this game that could very well destroy your endless runs. Let's look at a very simple combo to run into. A turnaround character and a chaser. A handful of monsters require you to stare at them in order to keep them from attacking you at full speed. Normally this is fine, but doing this while someone else is actively chasing after you at full speed tests a few things. How well can you maneuver around an area without looking at it? What are you gonna do if you hit a wall? How fast do you go around corners if you need to keep your eye on something or else it attacks you? And this has multiple other variables depending on which chase creature it is and which turnaround character it is. It's really exciting, and understand I just named one combination of creature types. There's a good few challenging duos that you can get that'll really test how good you are at this game. And that's not even all, as sometimes you can get up to 3 creatures, making an already stressful situation that much more intense. My only complaint is you have to go a fair bit into Endless Mode before you experience these combinations of monsters, meaning every Endless run starts off kinda slow. I sorta wish there was a separate mode or toggle, maybe called Double Trouble or something, where they'd immediately allow double enemies to spawn so the game is non-stop intensity once you are in a chase. It'd be perfect for people like me who sometimes just want to dive into the crazier parts of this game. Gameplay without a doubt will be the main component of this simple game. But we have to talk about the writing here, because it's odd, at least in my opinion. If you played the main story, you know. The only real writing you get here is the cat DOS descriptions of some creatures, a few notes, and the ending. The cat DOS and notes give some interesting little bits, but not really enough to sink your teeth into. And the ending, even as said in the game, is a joke. Your two endings are you kill the final boss and become a specimen, or you defeat him, the ceiling suddenly falls down on top of you, and you join Spooky's ghost army. To which they say, what did you expect, some serious ending? I'm not exactly hurt by this, as this wasn't a game I was taking super seriously anyway, but it leads to some serious whiplash once you open the DLCs and suddenly they decide they want to have an overarching depressing plot about Spooky losing her life as a kid from her PTSD-ridden dad that ends with you destroying the mansion and freeing all the trapped souls inside. It feels like they made this goofy little game and then said, wait, we can actually write too! And I'm not saying this because I think the DLC's plot is bad or anything. Quite the contrary, because I think it puts a bow on this game nicely, but it's the fact that you can tell they didn't really take things seriously until they noticed they could, to which they dove into the deep end. The tone shift is noticeable and just a bit weird in my opinion. I know some may be thinking, well, what about the unique death screens and death lines? They're pretty good most of the time, but also ping pong in tone quite often due to what our cast is comprised of. Hook Doll is a great example. When you look at Hook Doll, you see, well, a doll with multiple hooks in it, as if it was torture. If you follow the Dollhouse DLC's plot, you know they were trying to bring things to life through dolls with an underground lab you run into. With the subtle storytelling, it's clear that this doll was experimented on and messed up. When it kills you, multiple hooks are driven into your body, mimicking the state it was left in. And the final death quote, which you can see on screen, reflects the agonizing pain it would have had to deal with. This is cool and, like I said, shows the DLC's strengths in good writing. But then you get to Otto the damn otter and the tone shift is insane. Otto is a FNAF-inspired animatronic with no lore other than he's from a pizza place, and when he kills you, he does an extremely goofy version of a FNAF jump scare. Becca is literally based off the Rebecca Black Friday music video. And yes, I get they're joke characters, but it doesn't change the fact you'll run into both Peak Hook Doll and Otto the Otter in the same game mode. Is this a ginormous point that brings down the quality of the game? No, not really. It's just something I think about from time to time, and I'd feel weird personally if I didn't bring it up here. We're gonna touch on some smaller things, then we'll wrap up. The visuals. This game has a very simple, blocky, goofy style to it. Some may say it's ugly, but I think it's quite charming. There's not much of note to say about it until we get to many of our creature introductions. Most times a creature gets introduced in Endless, or even in the normal story, they have a unique locale to go alongside them. It's great for the fact that A, having a unique place to go with all these creatures is impressive, but B, it forces an oh shit moment anytime it happens. You go from sprinting down halls of pretty similar looking rooms to suddenly being transported into what almost feels like a different game. The tension building while you await the monster's appearance. Sure, this effect gets lessened the longer you play the game and learn what monsters correspond to which areas, but I feel it never straight up loses its effect. And given how many monsters there are, sometimes it can be more scary thinking it's one monster and suddenly a different one pops out and starts chasing you. Now, I wouldn't particularly say that this game has spectacular sound design in the way that everything sounds weighty and raw, but like every good horror game should, its sound design properly alerts you to whatever you're about to go against in an instant before you even see the threat. This might not sound crazy, but when you think about the fact that there's 31 creatures in this game, it's quite an impressive feat, and done extremely subtly to the point that most might not have noticed how well it's handled here. Let's look at the Merchant for instance. He's a character that'll hurt you when you're not facing him. Your main indicator that he's moving or has begun chasing you is the rattling of his wooden body that immediately lets you know who it is. Ringu lets out a unique nasty groan when she first appears. And then let's end the examples of this with two of my favorites, starting with the Hanged Man. We're about to get into OST, but when the Hangman begins chasing you, he doesn't have any noticeable music start playing. The main way you'll be alerted to him is through the ungodly noise he makes when he appears, as without it, he's mostly silent. It immediately puts you on edge, and it's a really cool way to alert the player. The last one is a simple thing that applies to any chase monster. If they don't have any way to maneuver into the room with their unique ability, they'll begin kicking down doors after you while they chase you. It really gives chases this frantic energy as you run from a creature while hearing it straight blast doors off the hinges. Awesome small touch. But now, let's move on to the OST. Every single monster, alongside having unique rooms and sound effects, have their own themes to go alongside them. Some go for more epic chase music like Body Bags, or uncomfortable vibes like Food Demons does. I'm not gonna say I'll start bumping these in my Spotify playlist, but I feel they all convey what emotion they were going for quite well. It's part of why the empty rooms with no creatures work so well here. The music will either cut out completely, or you're left with a nice casual track. Then the moment a creature shows up, it immediately shifts back into uncomfortable panic. Small things like this really show attention to detail and care, despite how simple the premise of this game is. I know this video doesn't seem that long, but honestly, this isn't that complicated of a game. It's a simple horror/action game where you run through doors and deal with multiple monsters. But as I've said before, simple doesn't mean bad. This game's got a lot of charm to it due to all of its references and simple art style. And it also has a lot of replayability, or simply content to dive into due to its endless mode, the DLCs together, or the base game. All of which have elements of unpredictability and RNG, so no two playthroughs are going to be the exact same. What also helps is it's not exactly expensive, so if it doesn't immediately hold your interest, it doesn't hurt to be a game you just come back to over the time of owning it. It even seems to be getting improved to this day, with an HD patch dropping sometime in the near future. It's a cool little game that if you're into horror, I'd recommend you take a peek at. But anyways, I think I've said my piece. What do you guys think? As always, as long as you're respectful, I'm glad to discuss with you in the comments, and I've been Ed, and I am out.